welcome back to Academia Magica. The topic of today is one system of magic that most likely has the most captivating, fascinating name to it. I'm talking about the Enochian Magick, the system of magic of John Dee and Edward Kelley. Actually, the name Enochian came quite later, as Dee and Kelley actually in the records always addressed this system of magic simply as angelic. An angelic system, and the name Enochian was labeled later, connecting the mythological association, as this kind of magic was supposed to be given by God to Enoch, by which Enoch supposedly did his miracle and his magic. That's why the angelic magic was later dubbed Enochian Magick. We'll be going through a little bit of history, how this system was received, and a little bit also on how it's still practiced today. Well, first of all, I think it's necessary to start to introduce the star of the system, Dr. John Dee. Dr. John Dee, that actually here, this is my version of Dr. John Dee. Dr. John Dee is basically the stereotype of the typical wizard. He was born in 1527, and as I say, it's the typical stereotype. I think he has inspired Shakespeare later. I mean, when we think about a wizard with a white pointed beard, dressed in black, is definitely the image of John Dee. John Dee was a fantastic mind. He was an astronomer, a mathematician, an astrologer, teacher, advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Actually, he was the personal astrologer and personal advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. And not only that, he was also acting as a spy for Queen Elizabeth, considering his possibility to travel all over Europe to meet other great minds of the time about mathematics, astronomy, and other things. Of course, he opened the doors to him to know a little bit what was going on in Europe at that time. So John Dee, just to frame the figure of John Dee, we say was born in 1527. So his life is, we're talking about after the boom of the Renaissance. So John Dee is living in the period where Rosicrucianism is living during the Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and where all this information were flooding through Europe. And this is where the major occultists were focusing their researches and studies. So the figure, the magic, the approach of John Dee is essentially a Rosicrucian / Hermetic Neoplatonic Renaissance kind of magic. He also lived pretty much at the same time of Giordano Bruno, and some records says that the two persons may have met in London. Despite his mind, his brilliant mind toward science, what John Dee may have lacked in this occult research was the possibility or the faculty to be a scryer or to have some kind of access to the otherworldly. So we know that the beginning of his work, he was working alone for a couple of years without, or at least we don't have a record of big major results, until finally in his life came Edward Kelley. Edward Kelley, born in 1555, same to John Dee, was a Renaissance occultist and a medium and a scryer. So when these two men finally join forces, this is where we start to have the records of their work. Chronologically speaking, the work of Dee and Kelley can be divided into three periods. Three periods where there were some months of inactivity in between, most likely due to some disagreement between the two men or other reason. But so far we have three separate periods and not really connected to each other, meaning that what they received, what they were scrying or they were working on during the first period is not necessarily related to the second and third period. So starting from the first one, the first period, also known as the Heptarchia Mystica. This is pretty much a complete system of magic, resembling a bit the art of drawing Spirit into Crystals by Trithemius. He has some reference to the Heptameron of Dabano, and he has also some kind of Solomonic structure to it, but is a complete system. What D. N. Kelley has received during this period is recorded in the famous diary of John Dee, known as the Mysteriorum Libri Quinti, or the 5 books of mystery. That has been translated in English, and there is a few versions already available. I'll leave anyway the reference to the book at the end of the video. So back to the system. Most of the implements that were used and are still used today for Enochian magic were actually received during this period. For implement, we're talking about the ring, the famous Enochian ring, which the angel claimed that this ring was made for John Dee, and it was made according to the original ring of King Solomon, the ring that allowed King Solomon to have control over the demons. Although this ring has a little bit different features from what we usually see in other grimoires, especially as these 4 letters P-E-L-E that could stand for Latin, he will work wonders. Next to the ring, they received the lamen to be worn by the magician in order to dignify the magician, to bring it in an upper level, in order to receive and to talk to these angelic spirits, as well as connecting the magician to the holy table. The holy table that is the main piece of the Enochian magic, and is still, as I mentioned, still used today. The instruction on how to build this holy table was given even in the details of size. It was asked to be 2 cubits square and 2 cubits high. And this is supposed to be the table where actually the implements are put on in order to proceed with the working. The next implement is most likely the most famous, the most recognizable tool for Enochian magic, and I'm talking about the sigil of a method, the Sigillum Dei, this extremely elaborated, complicated sigil, which is possible actually to see today at the British Museum. It's still there in the corner dedicated to John Dee. You can still see the sigillum is a large disc of wax with extremely complicated figures on the top. You find a pentagram in the middle. There are heptagrams, and names, letters around each figure. The names are actually angelic names, some coming from the occult philosophy of Agrippa. Some other can be recognized as planetary archangels. But anyhow, this complicated sigil was to be placed on the top of the holy table, and the scrying tool, in our case the famous obsidian black mirror, to be put over the sigil. The next implements received were the ensigns of creation. These are a series of 7 talismans, and each corresponding to a specific planet and to a specific day of the week. Finally, to complete this pretty elaborated system of magic, D. N. Kelley received 7 by 7 tablets filled with numbers and letters, from where, by connecting certain numbers and certain letters, they could have identified the names of 49 angels, known as the 49 angel of the heptarchic hierarchy. This angel supposedly to be somehow associated to the 4 elements. Those are a hierarchy of angels that are pretty close to our world, those that would have been easier for D. N. Kelley to contact. So basically, through these implements, the system was pretty straightforward. As I say, resembling a little bit the art of drawing spirit into crystal of Trithemius, where the magician wears the ring, puts on the lamen, sits in front of the holy table, puts his wax sigil in the middle, and finally puts the obsidian mirror over the sigil and start scrying, start invoking and scrying for these 49 angels invoked in a hierarchical manner. And this complete the first period of the Heptarchia Mystica. Moving on to the second period, most likely the second period is the most complicated, the harder to make sense of, because they received, first of all, they received the famous angelic alphabet and a very mysterious book called Liber Luoga Eth. Unfortunately, whether we did not have access to the complete information through this system, or it was already confused by itself, unfortunately, as of today, we don't have enough information to understand what is in this book, and especially to understand what was the purpose of the book. So as I mentioned, this second period is a little bit foggy, is a little bit confusing. Last, we move into the third period, the period that is properly addressed finally as Enochiana or Enochian Magick. What Dee and Kelley received during this period, first of all, are the famous 49 invocation or 49 calls in a completely new and unknown language, the famous angelic or Enochian language, which seems to be a proper language, it's a properly structured language, and it's so actually well done that it seems quite impossible that Dee and Kelley could have made it from scratch. So of course, there is debatable whether this language was in somehow really created or actually received some kind of otherworldly kind of sources. Nevertheless, we have this call in Enochian language. Out of these 49 calls, 30 are the famous calls, invocation to the 30 ethers that are still used in the Enochian practice today. So we have 30 calls to 30 ethers. They receive the names of these 30 ethers. What exactly these 30 ethers are is also a little bit difficult to understand. In modern practice, there is an association between the ethers and, for instance, the tree of life. So moving from one ether to another ether would be like climbing the tree of life from one sephira to the other. So these 30 ethers is somehow a subdivision of the universe, consciousness, going from our world until the divine or mind of God. Unfortunately, from the record of Dee and Kelley, there is not really much more explanation related to what exactly these ethers are and how to use them. Furthermore, they received a large table known as the Great Table, which is a grid of 27 times 25, again filled with letters, said to represent a map of the world. In fact, this Great Table can be divided into 4 squares, obviously related to the 4 elements, and it can also be divided into 91 parts, said to cover physical places on Earth. And again, all this system, these letters could be combined to have exactly the name of the angel and another hierarchical structure of angels, starting from what we call the elemental kings that are supposed to be on the top of the controlling the elements, all the way down to lesser angels in charge of specific areas of practical knowledge. So as we have seen, the Enochian Magick, despite being a pretty elaborate system of magic, the information that came to us, whether not completed because we were missing records from John Dee and Kelley or for many other reasons, what we don't have is a proper instruction on how this system was supposed to work or to be used. Thus what happened is later on different kind of magicians and different kind of magical society tried their own interpretation and tried their own way to develop and evolve through the information available, starting of course from the Golden Dawn, And the system developed by the Golden Dawn over Enochian Magick is most likely the most practiced today in our modern days for a magician approaching this kind of magic. Next we have Aleister Crowley's interpretation, which of course is mainly based on the interpretation and system of the Golden Dawn, especially through the association between the ethers, the 30 ethers that we have seen before, and the Tree of Life. So the climbing of the ethers being similar to moving from Sephira to Sephira in the Tree of Life. And he did actually practically try this kind of magic, and all the records of this experiment, of this exploration of the ethers, is recorded in the book The Vision and the Voice. And this brings us pretty much at the end of this overview about the Enochian Magick. Just want to give you a few references for some additional reading. One book that we have mentioned through the video was John Dee's 5 Book of Mystery, De Mysteriorum Libri Quinti. You can find several versions available. I recommend this version, the version by Joseph Peterson. We have the record of Aleister Crowley, The Vision and the Voice. And finally, for who wants to have more detail both on the theoretical and practical approach to modern Enochian magic today, I also recommend the book Enochian Vision Magic by Lon Milo Duquette. Another book that I would like to recommend is The Angel of the West Window by Gustav Meyrink. This is narrative, but is about the story of John Dee and Kelley, and for who knows Gustav Meyrink, Meyrink being student of the occult, in all his stories, in all his narrative, there's a lot of truth and a lot of research into it. This completes our brief overview of Enochian magic. If you didn't subscribe to the channel yet, please make sure to subscribe so you'll be updated for the next video. Thanks again for your time, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day. Goodbye.